Welcome to an RPG in a Box Basics video tutorial. In this video, I'm going to cover something that I think is very important for people who are starting out with RPG in a Box to know, and that is how to use the debug tools in RPG in a Box to debug their game and look up how their game is working. Okay, so there's 3 different debug tools that you have available to you, and I'm going to show you where they are, how to enable them, and what they do, and how to use them. Okay. So the first of those, the most important of those, if we go into the game configuration panel, in the general section is the Debug Console. Okay, by default, unless you've turned it on before, this will be off. Okay, so just make sure that's on. I think most projects start with it on, but just check that. Yours might be off. If so, turn it on. This is one of the most important development things to have on while you're making your game. You're going to be using this a lot. Okay, so make sure you have this on. If you don't have this on, then developing your game, you're going to be blind to what your game is doing. Anything that's not working properly, it's going to be really hard to sort of work out why it's not working properly. You really need to have this thing on. Okay, and we'll talk about what it does in a minute. Okay, I'm not sure what the help says. Oh yeah, the help will tell you a little bit about it. It will tell you the key that you need to press in order to bring it up, that sort of thing. Okay, so we will go into game quickly and I'll show you the Debug Console. So here we are in the game. So there are one of 3 keys that you can press to bring up the Debug Console. So I will put all 3 of them on the screen because they'd be difficult to describe, but press these 3 on your keyboard. One of them will bring down the console as long as that option is on. Make sure that option's on first, otherwise nothing will open the console. But press one of these 3 keys on your keyboard and you should eventually see this pop down. Okay, so yeah, so in my case it's this particular key. Okay, and this is the Debug Console. It even says welcome to the Debug Console. From this console you can enter box-like code directly into the command line to execute it, and then there's also some commands down below which you can also use. Okay, so let's go through some of these. Exec allows you to execute a script. So if you've written a script file, let's say you've got a script called quest B or whatever, and it gives you a quest, you can now execute that quest, that script name, and it will run that script. Okay. Clear will clear the console, will clear this console. So if I run a load of things, and it obviously is going to be erroring because one of them typing is valid. But if I just fill this up and then type clear, it will clear the console of anything. If you close it, reopen it. Can you scroll with the? I don't think you can. Oh yeah, you can scroll. You can scroll up and down to rerun commands using the up and down arrow keys. I believe if you type help, we'll just check. Yes, help will bring back the display this information again. So if you want to remind yourself what's the commands it suggests, you can type help to bring this up again. So we've got no clip. If you run that, then that means that you can move the mouse separately from the player, so you can move around your map. I'm not sure how you rotate, if you even can, but certainly you can fly around. I've never used no clip before, but just to show you that is there. So we can type no clip again, and that will disable it. Puts the camera back to the player. Type help again. So then we have nav on. Now, for now, this is going to say, as it will for most people starting out, it will say the navigation debugging is not available. Okay. So we'll take a look at that in a moment, how to fix that. And then we'll also talk about what navigation debugging is. Then we've got debug on. And if you have any IDs, I don't think we've got any at the moment, it will show tooltips and IDs when you hover over things. So we'll take a look at that in a minute. I need to set some things up for that. So we'll turn that off. Okay. Now, other things that the console can do is it can run any command. So anything you would put into a script can also be directly typed here. So for example, if we want a display message to pop up, then we can just type display message and then the message you want. So hello viewers, we run that. Now you get a display message like you would do if it was in a script. Hello viewers. So you can test things that you would normally put in a script. You can test them directly from the console. But one of the most invaluable, just you're going to thank me later for this, is the print command. Okay, this is vital for game development, because whenever you want to query what something is, what's inside a variable, or what's something set to, why isn't something running when it should run? Let's say you've got a script and it's not doing something. You want to know why it's not doing it. It's really important to print. For example, if we print player, then it will show us, what character model we're using and what coordinates we're currently standing on. You also have access to, from the console, you have access to the self built-in variable. Now, self is a dynamic variable, meaning it changes depending on the context. So if I aim my mouse cursor over this chest, then self is now the chest. So if I print self, it comes back as object treasure chest, and that's the model treasure chest, and then the coordinates of which the model is placed. If I move up a little bit, put my mouse cursor over this boulder, print self, now it's the object sandstone boulder and the coordinates of which it's placed. Okay, so your mouse is dynamic. If you ever want to know what the mouse is aiming at, you can use the self command. Print self will show you what the mouse is aiming at. Okay, so that is the debug console. So if we normally just give an item, so let's just, again, we'll type one of the inbuilt scripting commands. We'll give item 001. So normally when you open your inventory, you just see, in this case, the word hammer, which is the name of the item. Okay, but if we bring down the console and we type debug on, then now when you hover over, you get the item ID. So if you want to know, what is the ID of this item, for whatever reason, you can do that. Okay, so that's the debug console, and it's invaluable. So if ever somebody asks you on the Discord, can you open the console and print something, that's what we're referring to. So you need to have that enabled. So make sure that's on. And when you're in game, you need to press that key that brings down that console from the top of the screen. And then you need to type print, and then whatever it is that you need to print. So that's the debug console. Very, very useful. Really good to know about. The other two debug tools that you're going to want to make use of are in the settings section. So if you click settings and click quick play, this is where you have the navigation debugging, which will turn that on. But you also have collision debugging. We'll come back to that. We'll click OK first, and we'll click quick play. Now that we've turned navigation debugging on, when we bring down the console, this command, which was disabled earlier, the nav command, is now going to work. So if we type nav on, what it does is it draws the lines that you would typically see in the map editor, and it shows them during the game. So as we're walking around, now currently I'm in a free movement project, so I'm not actually tied to the lines, but if it was a grid game, you'd be following these lines. Okay. Now, if you had any scripts that were updating the navigation, such as changing this line from green to orange or whatever, from interact to walk and interact or whatever, you can see that happening live, right? So you can see what's happening to these lines, these colors, as and when they happen, right? For example, let's just draw a quick orange line to this chest and here, like so. And then what we'll do is we'll select the chest and we'll do a quick script for when you interact with it. We'll just do a quick script and we'll just write replace navigation chest 1. I'll do self, because self will be a reference to the chest because we're putting this script on the chest. So replace navigation self, walk and interact only is what it currently is. So we'll reference the current navigation. and then we'll change it to, let's do pending. You could also do none, and that would just delete the navigation. Okay, so let's do a wait of 3 seconds, and then we'll repeat this, and we'll put pending as what it currently is, and we'll change it to none. Validate, click OK, or run the game again. So this is just to give you an idea of seeing what the navigation is doing. So if we bring down the console, turn on the navigation, now we can see the lines, we can see our current orange lines. If I go up to this chest and I interact with it, these should go purple first to the pending lines, then after 3 seconds, they should just get deleted. So they go purple, and then they get deleted. So this allows you to see what your game is doing with the navigation by looking at the navigation line. So if ever you're unable to move somewhere, or you're moving somewhere you shouldn't be able to, then you can go into game while it's playing and you can turn on these lines and you can see what the lines are doing. So that will give you a better insight into, is the code doing what it should be doing in the first place? If it's not, if the lines haven't been deleted or they're still what they used to be, then you know what's going wrong with your game a bit more. So you can then take a look at the part of your code that's doing the navigation with an eye to, why is it not doing it, that sort of thing. So it kind of helps you sort of point you in the right direction. So that's the navigation debugging, very useful as well, just to see what the navigation is doing behind the scenes of your game while you're playing it. And then the last one is the collision debugging. Again, that's found in settings, quick play. If we turn that on, typically this is more useful for free movement games, which is currently what I'm playing in anyway, so we'll turn that on. Okay, this will allow you to see the collision of all the models in the game. So if we go into game, now you can see the mesh around everything. Okay, now free movement uses these meshes to govern what blocks you and what doesn't. So for example, you can see the sort of, depends, difficult to see here. Let's we stand here, you can see this blue box around the player. That's the bounding collision box, right? So that's whatever collides with that box is where collision comes from. So here we've got one around this wall. So if I walk into this wall, that's going to stop me because the collision box of this wall is colliding with the collision box of this player. This archway, for example, I may or may not be able to walk through because actually I think the top of the arch is at the same height as the player. So if I try and move into that arch, I actually can't. So this is an instance where in free movement, this particular asset, the arch, isn't going to work without adjusting the asset, okay? And likewise, here's the bounding box around the chest. So as soon as I walk and up to the chest and interact with the bounding box of the chest, that's where I collide. And then same with the boulders here, you can see the mesh around the boulder, okay? Now, collision is a topic we're going to cover separately another time. I'm not going to go into any great detail about how you use it and how you change the collision and things like that, because you can do. This is really just to show you that if you turn this on, this will, when you're developing free movement games, is when you're going to use this the most. Because if you're doing a grid mode game, then it's the lines that govern where you can and can't go. So if this was a grid movement game, because there's a green line going through this archway, collision or not is irrelevant. You will be able to walk through because you'll follow the green line. But the moment you turn free movement on, for the player, they will have to use the collision, and therefore in this case you'd have to fix the archway, okay? But as I say, we'll cover collision at a separate point. This is just to show you how to turn it on so that you can then use these mesh outlines to debug, the size of your models, the size of collision, and see what's causing the issue with being unable to fit through certain gaps and things like that. In this case, we can clearly see that the arch needs expanding a bit more, or the player needs shrinking a bit more, one of the two, so that the two separate meshes, the player's collision mesh and the arch's collision mesh will fit together, one can fit inside the other. So, and also you've got to deal with the width as well. So you need to make sure that the collision mesh of the archway on the sides can fit the player's width as well. So things like that, just looking at the two different meshes and making sure, if we zoom in a bit, that the mesh outline of the player fits just before the mesh of the sides, things like that, right? So this will show you the meshes so that you can debug those kind of things. So there you go. So those are the free debug tools that you have available to you in RPG in a Box. You have the Debug Console in the game configuration panel. Make sure that's on all the time. It should be on no matter what you're doing. It should be on all the time because you'll almost always want to print something, okay? Or, query a command or something like that. And then the other ones in the settings tab under quick play, we've got the navigation debugging, so you can see what your navigation is doing. And if you're not doing grid mode, but you're doing free movement mode, then you'll want the collision debugging so you can see what the meshes are doing. Okay. So with that said, that will wrap up this video on debug tools. Hopefully you find these tools useful, and now you know where they are and how to enable them. There's no excuse not to use them because they are absolutely vital as you develop your games. So with that said, I'll wrap this video up. Stay tuned for the next tutorial.